Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv, at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 10 until noon. Grateful to be here again at 2131 East 10th Street, right across the street from the Bonner Center. And if you're at all interested in meeting with me after the show sometime, happy to do so. They serve really good salads over at Burger King, so that's right across the street. Looking forward to that. Got some great interviews set up through the rest of this particular month. We've got Tina Crosby coming in this next week, talking with us about her new endeavors, and of course the TV personality from here in Indianapolis. We're looking forward to having her on the show. And then, of course, Dr. Clyde Posley, my brother, is coming in here in just a few moments, joining me as co-host to this particular show. Let me just give you an overview for what we are doing on a regular basis through Comenius. This is a Comenius Institute-sponsored radio show, Warp and Woof Radio. We cross 3 bridges at the Comenius Institute. The first bridge that we cross is that into college at IUPUI, helping Christian young people to think differently, to think Christianly about the studies that they have there. Also interacting with all kinds of folks there, staff, faculty, students. I'm teaching a course there at IUPUI, reading, writing, and inquiry. Happy to engage those kinds of things with those kinds of folks down at IUPUI. That's the first bridge into college. The second bridge is into community, and the emphasis, of course, in community is always going to be the same, and that is that we are linking communities in and around Indianapolis. That means Indianapolis leaders, and so we are looking forward to connecting with all different kinds of folks. Today, of course, as I mentioned, Elevate Indianapolis is coming in. Aaron Story, the president CEO of that good nonprofit organization, which is helping to mentor urban youth here in Indianapolis, working specifically with IPS schools. Really grateful for their good work. And of course we do that interconnectivity in terms of community through this particular radio show, Warp and Woof Radio. We've been doing this now for over 2.5 years. In fact, this is, I think, our 135th show. So we're very happy to have had the opportunity to be here, invested and involved in the city of Indianapolis. Grateful to interact with people around the world, actually connecting with us from various continents and various great cities in and around the world. So that's the second bridge that we cross into communities, with special emphasis, by the way, on linking black and white leaders. And I should just pause for a moment to give recognition to the homegoing, to the graduation to glory of our friend Charles Ellis, Pastor Charles Ellis from 25th Street Baptist Church. Just ascended to glory here this last weekend. Grateful for his life, grateful for the opportunity to have known him, to have worked a bit with him here in the radio show, 10 Point Coalition, Charles Harrison, Pastor Charles Harrison. Their show airs immediately after our show here at RadioNext.tv. And so we're really grateful to have had a long-standing relationship with Charles. Looking forward to that reunion someday with him, but nonetheless giving our deep condolences to those in and around his church community, his church family, his personal family, and of course to the 10 Point Coalition, Indianapolis 10 Point. Great work that they do. So the second bridge into communities, that's our emphasis. The third bridge that we cross is actually into culture. And so we do that in lots of different ways. Just to give you an example of this, I just finished this morning before I came over to the studio, just finished the opportunity to contribute to a peer-reviewed journal, the Theological Foundations, the Abolitionist Movement, which comes out of the Civil War period. Took a great class this last year on that particular issue, and glad to have written that article. It's going to appear in Integrite, which is a journal of faith and learning coming out of Missouri Baptist University in Missouri. Grateful for the opportunity to write. You see our Truth in 2 videos on a regular basis. They come out on Tuesday mornings. A shout out to our good friend and colleague Josh Collingwood, and for the good work that he does, certainly with the technological aspect of what we produce. There's going to be a documentary coming out about Comenius and the work that we do around Indianapolis into cultures. Glad for the opportunity to be invested there as well. But Josh does great work. And then, of course, there's Polly Riddell. Polly does tremendous connection work for us at Comenius. Grateful for her relationships with all kinds of different folks in and around Indianapolis. In fact, I'm going to Greenwood right after the show today to meet with somebody down there that's interested in our show and the work that we do. So we're always grateful for the work that Polly does connecting us in and around Indianapolis. And then, of course, we have a great opportunity in terms of crossing that bridge into culture. Just been invited to Marian University in October 30th. We'll give you the details as we get closer to the day. But I'll be speaking there on Gothic horror literature, which is one of my great loves and passions. I actually teach a course on that through Indiana Wesleyan University. Grateful for the opportunity to do those things. And, of course, the issue of Gothic horror is a long-standing one for me. I've been teaching Dracula, Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde, Island of Dr. Moreau for a very long time. Love those books. They are great morality tales. They have universal truths for any person, anywhere, anytime, for all people, cultures, geography, ethnicities, does not matter. These are great books to study and read. So I'll be giving a presentation at Marian University. And then, of course, just yesterday, I should give a shout out to a colleague at IUPUI who introduced me to the Ray Bradbury Center at IUPUI, a fantastic opportunity to see something that exists only one place in the world, and it is at Indianapolis. It is in Indianapolis at IUPUI, and the good work of John Eller and Jason Ackerman. I was grateful to have met Jason yesterday, and the preservation that they are doing with the Ray Bradbury materials. And we're talking about materials that are written on paper, so not just the normal things that you might think about in terms of streaming information, but we're talking about a collection of tremendous value there at IUPUI, and grateful to have had the opportunity to talk with Jason yesterday for over an hour. Tremendous work that they're doing there at the Ray Bradbury Center. I mention that because, again, our interest is always in all different kinds of venues, all different directions. Our focus, of course, is also in the emphasis on culture. So that's just one more example of the kind of things that we do and the kind of work that we are invested in at IUPUI. So in this particular show, just as an introduction, we've given kind of an overview of the Comenius Institute, what we do, the kinds of work that we're invested in. My co-host, Dr. Clyde Posley, just come in to the station, to the radio show. I'm going to be adjusting the screen here for everybody so that we get both of us in here. Good morning, brother.
Good morning. How are you?
Glad to be here with you today. Thank you ever so much. Our screens, of course, are interesting propositions here, trying to get tripods and all of those good things in the right positions. And of course, we're doing this through YouTube Live and Facebook Live. And then H.B. Bell, our great producer, good friend here at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. You see the banner behind us. He's the one who takes care of podcasts coming out later on. Then we shuffle it off to Josh Collingwood. We mentioned Josh a moment ago. Thankful for his technological services. And we get this thing then posted later on today. Again, Aaron Story will be with us here in the second hour, but after we take a one-song break, we'll do that in just a second, but after we take a one-song break, we'll be right back and talk about the biblical concept of mentoring between Dr. Posley and myself. We'll be talking about those kinds of ideas. So, you are listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. A one-song break. We'll be right back. We are back. Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every single Wednesday from 10 until noon, and we are across the street from the Bonner Center at 2131 East 10th Street. Our producer, H.B. Bell, and co-host Dr. Clyde Posley, Dr. Mark Eckel, we are glad to be here with you today. We are focused and centering our attention today on the topic of mentoring. So, Dr. Posley, I'll just run a couple of these ideas here, this etymological background. Mentor literally meant a wise advisor, somebody who becomes a coach, one who admonishes, an instructor, a trainer, in the athletic sense, but also one who comes alongside to help in scholarship. A tutor, pick up any of those concepts that you would like and run with it here this morning. What are we talking about when we're talking about a Christian view of mentoring?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that our first mentor, obviously we're going to talk about youth today.
Yes.
But the first mentor is the Paraclete.
Oh, Holy Spirit.
Holy
yeah,
Spirit.
Yeah.
This morning, I was talking to my wife, and I was talking about how God, in regeneration, makes us righteous. And then he himself moves inside of us to then help us to display or live out the righteousness he has put in us.
Yes.
And so not only does God make us new, but then he moves in us to teach us how to be new. So then God becomes the first mentor. And interestingly enough, Jesus calls that first mentor the Comforter. So one of the first things that the Holy Spirit the Spirit of God does when he moves in us is comfort us as a means of getting us into this new life. Many young people, moving forward with this conversation, many young people who need mentoring, people period, but we're talking about young people today, who need mentoring, the mentoring must come first, or should come. It's good for that mentoring to come in the form of comfort. Comfort first, following the model of Jesus. In the Beatitudes, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about blessed are they who mourn, they shall be comforted. And it doesn't take far to look today to see we have a vast amount of young people who are mourning, and some don't know that they're mourning. And so mentoring is a biblical concept. It comes from God, and all throughout Scripture, Old Testament, as you call it, First Testament teaching, moving into the introduction of the New Testament teaching, we see the mindset of God desiring to be closer and closer and closer to humanity, even to the place where the angel calls Jesus the Emmanuel, to be God with us. And so it's God. So we know we can derive from that it's God's every intention to not just guide us, not just mentor us, but to guide us and do it from as close a proximity to us as possible.
I think we talked, or at least I mentioned this maybe last week, the week before, Numbers chapter 11, where Moses says, having been anointed with the Holy Spirit, I wish that all people would have the Holy Spirit. And so we're talking about something that happens in both Testaments here, as you well attest. And this concept, of course, of comforting is a really cool way to begin the show, because when we come alongside young people, oftentimes what I discover, speak about your own experience, of course, but what I discover is they're really receptive when you're generous and gracious to them. So here's just an example of this. This last week, in fact, it was the very first day of class at IUPOI a few weeks back. One of my students, she came in. She has this little boy with her, about 3-4 years of age, and she says, "Oh, Prof, my babysitter fell through. Do you mind if Manuel comes and is with us here today?" Oh, my word. Absolutely. He can come here anytime. So this last week, just yesterday, a Tuesday, she stops me before class. She smiled. She said, "Emmanuel wanted to come to class today because he wanted to see you again." The whole point, of course, is that when you demonstrate comfort to people, that kind of thing, that's the big deal.
Well, this is the design of God.
Yes.
If you in the family structure, the first what establishes the teaching relationship between parents and children is how the mother introduces herself to the child with tenderness, and nurturing, and suckling, and attachment, and all of what goes on in the brain to develop the emotional connection between the child and the mother in breastfeeding.
Yes.
So comfort is the first component that the parents that establishes the relationship between parents and children, and then we can teach.
Yes,
and it doesn't start with us as men. We need to accept that relationship is established in the woman, with the wife, with the mother, and so it can be argued then, Dr. Echo, that the wife establishes the platform for the husband to teach and lead the family.
Oh my, that's really great stuff, man. I got to tell you that, and so we're going to go PG-13 here just for a second, PG-13. When Dr. Clyde mentioned the attachment issue between a child and the mother at breastfeeding, my mind immediately went to El Shaddai, which is the God of all strength or all comfort, and it means two different things in Hebrew. It can mean mountain or it can mean breast, and it's really fascinating that here you have this picture of God who is not only the strength of one's life but also the comfort at the same time.
That's right.
And so, and then of course to come over to Second Testament teaching, I'm thinking about what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, and he says, "I've become a mother and a father to you." That's just those fantastic. I'm so glad you picked up on that idea.
That's so true, and so mentoring, in my mind, an overarching way. I don't know if I say overarching way, maybe essentially. You know, we could argue that debate. When I say argue, I don't mean fight. I mean right. But mentoring is greatly affected by comfort, and so therefore. In my mind, any real mentoring has to begin with understanding the condition and the social and the space that you find a child in, a person, a child in, because their social space, the narrative that is their background, and the intersectionality of these situations that have made them who they are. Cannot be overlooked because of this concept I'm arguing about comfort.
Yes.
So if you're going to comfort them, you have to accept that they have been formed, that their ontology has been established by that collage of a background. And so, because they're not going to allow you to teach them if you don't seem sensitive to that.
Oh, man. Yeah. You know, every single week, as a sidebar to this whole conversation, I have to say, every single week, I am so excited to be with you because, you know, where we go with these conversations, you know, we set stuff up, but we never know where it's going to go. And so this week is just another example of this where, you know, we just kind of riffing here on theological truths.
Yeah. It's Holy Spirit. And I mean this, I do mean this humbly as I say this in response to you. That's, again, and I'm almost frightened to say it, but it's the truth, so it needs to be said, this next thing I'm about to say. This is what's supposed to happen when people just come to submit. Jesus said in the presence of, he told his disciples, in the presence of great men, the Holy Spirit at that time will give you what to say. And so if things that Christ promises in the Bible and what God promises in the Old Testament don't manifest in us, either God's lying or we're lying. If the Bible is true and we say we're men of faith, that stuff ought to be seen. We're not claiming to be perfect, but we should be able to sit down, like Peter said, and give an answer at any time about who our God is. And that's how we're doing. The Holy Spirit is just reaching in and taking that stuff out that he put in. We're sitting in these classes and sitting with these mentors and sitting with our parents, sitting with our wives, sitting with people who have helped to make our heads fat. And I mean in the sense of what, in the best sense, in the best sense of what Psalm 23 talks about. You know.
Yeah, this is
my head with oil.
That's right. This concept of mentoring youth and what Dr. Clyde has picked up on here early on. This need for us to recognize the necessity of comfort for young people, the necessity of seeing where they're at in our modern parlance. To accept them for who they are and the place that they're in, because folks, our students could be in very difficult places.
Sure, and you have to ask the Holy Spirit to help you understand it. I think part of what has helped our show and helped our friendship is some conversations that we had right after the show got going, where you talked to me a little bit about your background.
Yes.
I mean, we did it more than once, but what's coming to my mind, once we were at Murphy's, another time we were at my office.
Yeah.
And we just kind of shared, okay, we could not move forward without understanding. You have to be in someone else's background, but I can understand the principles.
Yep.
And so now I understand why Mark feels this way about that, you know, or whether I agree with that or not. Agreement is not always the biggest thing. Understanding.
Right.
Jesus, the Bible doesn't say with all thy getting, agree with it. He says with all thy getting, get an understanding.
Yes.
Because we can't sit on panels. We can't go about doing the things we want to do without understanding people's backgrounds. And I think that's what has helped Aaron be successful. And I know that as a parent, I have to consider the impact of my own children's background, Mark.
Yep.
And the impact on them, because what my narrative of what I think they've gone through, and I want our audience to hear this. What I think, the impact I think that their experience should produce in them is not fair to put on them. They have their own ideas of how and feelings about what they've gone through. As a mentor and a parent, I need to respect that if I'm going to comfort and then let that comfort lead to teaching.
That is the first step toward mentoring, is respect, being generous, gracious with people. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We're going to be taking a one-song break here in just a second. But when we come back, Dr. Clyde and I are going to continue our conversation about the mentoring of youth and the necessity of understanding a biblical mindset here of this very idea. The origins, of course, coming out of Scripture. In our second hour, Aaron Story, who's already arrived, is going to be here with us, talking with us about his great work at Elevate Indianapolis. Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We'll be right back. And we are back. Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. Picking up the podcast. If you're listening to us live via radio, I know that a lot of you have earbuds in around offices in and around Indianapolis, not to mention the nation and the world. Folks listen to us, watching us everywhere. It's one of the greatnesses of the time in which we live. We want to make a genuine, once again, comment about a pastor here in Indianapolis who has gone on to glory. Once again, I mentioned Charles Ellis, Pastor Charles Ellis, 25th Street Baptist Church at the top of the hour. But we want to mention him again. Our love and deepest condolences, brotherly love to those in the community and in the family.
And his wife, absolutely, and children. Absolutely.
Yep. And from one pastor, Dr. Clyde Posley, to another, and to all pastors, we once again want to express our condolences, but also our rejoicing in the fact that our brother has now risen to the great cloud of witnesses, and we are grateful for the opportunity to not only have known him, but look forward to the reunion as well.
Absolutely. To celebrate once again. We appreciate his work with the 10-Point Coalition.
Yes.
We appreciate every child that he influenced in his congregation, every gospel message that he preached, and he pastored a historic church in Indianapolis. 25th Street Baptist Church has a storied line of pastors, and we just appreciate what he has done. His work, because the 10-Point Coalition continues and the desire to do more for the community continues, his work will live on until the rapture.
There you go.
So we appreciate him, and may God rest his soul.
Absolutely. We're grateful for him and for the legacy that he leaves behind. Speaking of legacy, of course, we're talking today about mentorship and the options that we have of investing in the lives of young people. Aaron Story will be coming in the second hour here in just a few minutes. But before he comes in, let's continue our conversation about what does it mean to mentor young people and our interest in connecting with them. When we think about these kinds of things from our roles as teachers and pastors, Dr. Clyde, from your vantage point, what are some of the important ideas that are of necessity to communicate to young people in this particular culture?
Well, as you know, I'm a pastor, so I want to quickly establish. I think every mentor should quickly establish a God consciousness with young people they mentor. So you can't just come out as a mentor in a secular, maybe secular is not the word. You can't just go preaching, so to speak, in school systems funded by the government.
Right.
So then you establish a moral consciousness. If you cannot say God, so to speak, and I know you know what I mean.
Yes.
But you want to establish a moral consciousness. Let me say this very quickly as I answer your question. I was talking to someone the other day, and this person is bright, has a law degree, up in age, middle age like you and I. And we were talking about whether or not a single woman, can raise a boy to manhood as a single parent. I said, of course she can, because it's established. Because you raise people by principles, you mentor by principles. A black woman can raise a white boy, a white woman can raise a boy, because it's based on principles.
That's right.
This person said to me, and I quote, and I quote, morals have nothing to do with raising a boy to be a man.
Wow.
So I asked the person, I said, you don't mean to say that, do you?
Wow.
And he said, yes, I stand by what I say. It's not about morals. It's about teaching them their sexuality, teaching them this, that, and other thing. I said, I'm going to end this conversation.
Wow.
Because the first thing, so getting back to dealing with your question, the first thing that any mentor needs to establish in the life of a young boy or a young girl is there are consequences to your actions. There are right actions and there are wrong actions. Their morals and ethics are immutable. They do not change. They are real. They are reality. And so we need to, and so I said, so to be more specific about your question, the first thing that any mentor in my mind needs to establish is a morality of self, an awareness of who you are, and we believe that comes from seeing God.
There you go.
But you need to establish that, and then your place in the world, your relationship to the world. Because if you don't learn your relationship with the world, then you don't know how to interact in society and bless society or serve society and have it work with you to accomplish live up the purpose of your identity. So there are those. The last and as good as any, and most important as any, is to help them understand they are here by choice. They are not there is no birth that is an accident. The book of Ruth said God gives conception.
That's right.
So and even in extreme cases, in one of my Sunday school classes that came the other day, is abortion okay if the person was raped? No, abortion's not the will of God ever. That's not what God wants to happen.
Amen.
In the process of trying to give life, He doesn't want us to take life. So if a person were raped and they gave birth, and people can choose to do what they want to do, but the point is, if God permits a life, if He permits a life, then we need to that child needs to come to understand from a mentor, a parent or a mentor, you are not a mistake. God brought you here. He intends for you to be here. So He decided that this earth is not what He wants it to be, with you not in it. So mentors have to make sure that every child finally has an understanding of their purpose, their existence, and their value to this world, or they won't want to live.
And this goes back to how we actually started the process of this particular discussion, which goes all the way back to treating people with respect, with love, with generosity, with grace, that we meet people this way instead of bearing some kind of lawful constraint. We ought to bear with us the acceptance of love, no matter who the person might be.
That changes more things than anything.
And then, of course, of course, we could get into this long discussion. Maybe over Valentine's Day, we can get into a discussion about the source of love. I'm always shaking my head when people say, "Well, it's all about love," and my question is always the same. Well, where's the love come from? What's the source and the origin of the love? Define love.
It's about your origin. Of concepts about love, and that's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
That is a big deal, because if God is not teaching you love, then the world has taught you love.
Yes.
And many young people who need to be mentored are suffering from that very thing. People, so in many instances, people who do not know God have laid upon them some brand of secular love, reward-based love, or some illicit touching love, and now they are confused, and so it makes it hard for the mentor to come in and try to bring some Christian love.
Yes.
When hold up, love, because the last thing I know about love, I was in a dark room and such and such happened.
Yeah.
That didn't feel right to me. And so mentors have their work cut out for them. But the God of love, if true love can get past any pain, any hurt, any sorrow, I think I'm alive today and able to try to serve people like I do because some people loved me.
Yes.
And they weren't all black.
And the spirit of this that we're communicating here this morning about the importance of mentoring, it reminds me, perhaps we could pick up on this analogy, it's like the seed of a weed that finds its way into the crack in between the crevices of concrete. And over time, this seed becomes a weed or some kind of flourishing plant, and it begins to break up the concrete. This small seed is the very origin of something that begins to take away or demolish the hatred and the objectification that people might see in a wrong view of love and so on. And this is what mentors do. This takes place over a long period of time. This is not a run and gun, one and done kind of approach to life.
Right.
This is something that takes time and effort and patience. And this is, of course, what Aaron Story is going to be talking about in the second hour, where he's going to be emphasizing how much time it takes over a long period of years that this is going to actually be taking place, and the necessity of that we stay with it.
Yeah, that was really profound, and just for the sake of transparency, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to preach it from my pulpit.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell them you said it.
Oh!
I'm just going to say I said it.
No attribution.
Because I assume we're friends, and what's yours is mine. That's a good analogy. That's a good analogy. I really like that. And I hope you get a chance to say it again. How that one seed can break up what is the hardest surfaces known to man. That was really profound. That's a good analogy.
You can use that anytime. Thanks. I appreciate it.
I'll quote you.
Sometimes I have a hard time recontrolling myself after laughing so hard about stuff like that. But picking up on the mentoring idea, if we could just maybe spend the last 5 minutes of our first hour here talking about the necessity of time and the impact that time is on the life of an individual, and that maybe even talk a little bit about the consistency of being in the life of somebody else over time. When you think about that, what's your thought?
Well, I think that principle, the principle of consistency, was established by God in the book of Deuteronomy, chapters 4 through 6, as He is He's instructing Moses to tell the people to consistently put before the children the principles of God, the teachings of God, right on the doorpost.
Yeah.
Put it above the gate. Put it on their eyelids. So what we have there essentially is God establishing repetition.
Yes.
Which we're calling consistency in the lives of people. Many young people today are struggling because people who were in their lives who may not have even known, who were there to establish consistency and mold a framework of what reality should be like consistently. These people, many of them walked out, or the circumstances of life caused them to no longer be there. Because sometimes parents died. It's not that they walked away or whatever. And so when that consistency is broken, I have learned, I'm telling you, I've been pastoring for 30 years, and I was a youth pastor for 10 years. One of the single largest manifestations of bad behavior is lack of routine.
Wow.
In the home.
Okay. All right.
Revolving people.
Yeah.
Too many different people, because the human mind, Mark, is looking for a baby comes looking for a father and a mother, And when there's not one or both, the human mind will seek to find that in another person.
There you go.
And if that keeps shifting, eventually the human mind will start to say, well, there's not one.
Right.
So I need to be it.
I need to be it, or I'm going to find somebody on the street that's going to make it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm going to find my own mother and father. And this comes back to, let me just pick up on that 1 Thessalonians 2 passage again. When we're thinking about consistency, I'm thinking about what Paul says there, where he says, I've been a mother and a father to you and have worked night and day. So this is a consistency over time, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, that we're investing in the lives of individuals.
It's like farming, cultivating. Farmers don't. I live where there are a lot of farms on my way here, and you see the farmers out doing several things. Not just planting, but you see them irrigating. You see them tending to the in their fields doing various things. That's the way mentoring has to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, the issue of consistency and making sure that this happens day in and day out is a crucial component to how we think about raising children, much less raising the next generation. And of course, that's what we have been interested in here in this first hour. Aaron's story here in our second hour, just a couple of minutes coming in to highlight these kinds of ideas. Let me highlight just a couple of further thoughts here as we bring things to an end here in our first hour. The idea of wisdom throughout the world is so important in terms of ancient wisdom. We're concerned about mentorship, and as Dr. Clyde has well pointed out, that the issue of morality, the issue of helping people to understand that these are eternal principles, are essential and huge. So just to review a couple of the ideas that we've already brought forward here. Dr. Clyde and I have been talking about the idea of how a mother, when she gives birth, is automatically attached to her youngster, and we've talked about the importance of this, and of course then we connect that to the attachment that we have with others in our own sphere of influence. Any last words here, Dr. Clyde, before we go to commercial break?
Just a couple. It's important that we know that mentoring, I believe mentoring starts with comfort before there's teaching.
There you go.
Example.
Yes.
So comforting, teaching, example. But I want to shout out. There's someone listening to us, a group of people listening to us in North Carolina.
Oh, nice.
That name there.
Okay.
Pastor Kevin Parrish.
Nice.
Senior. He's listening to us from North Carolina.
Excellent.
And I'm trying to get him to evacuate and get off the radio and get off the internet and get out of North Carolina. But I wanted to mention to him because he and a group of people listen to us.
Nice.
Every week they got a taste of it, so we're glad
Wonderful.
to have them.
We're really grateful for your presence with us. Thanks ever so much. Not only on radio, but on Facebook Live, YouTube Live. We've been having some disconnect here. Facebook Live, hopefully that won't happen when Aaron comes in. We're going to be taking a 2-song break here at Warp and Woof Radio, and we do that at the top of the first hour so that we can go and get a picture with Aaron's story in this case. Just a reminder about next week. We've got Tina Crosby coming in. This is a really great opportunity for us to hear from one of the great journalists here in Indianapolis. Had a storied television career for many years, transitioning now into new things as an entrepreneurial voice around Indianapolis. Grateful to have her here. But this next hour, Aaron's story from Elevate Indianapolis is going to be with us. We're going to take a 2-song break, get some pictures. Coming back, HB Bell's going to run some cool jazz here for us. Listen closely. We'll be back in about 8 to 9 minutes. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We'll be right back. And we are back. Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 10 until noon. We're right across the street physically. Visibly, you can see us through the plate glass windows, which is really cool. Across the street from the Bonner Center, 2131 East 10th Street. Our producer, H.B. Bell, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site, is our manager, the one who kind of makes this whole thing happen. And Dr. Clyde Posley, Dr. Mark Eckel, your co-hosts every single week. We bring in an interview generally on the second hour, and this week we are just thrilled to have Aaron Story on in studio and on air. Aaron Story, the president CEO of Elevate Indianapolis. Aaron, we're grateful for your presence. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Give us kind of an overview of yourself, your family, your church, Your general work in Indianapolis.
Yeah, so our family moved here 17 years ago, north side. Grew up in a two-stoplight northern Indiana town. Got a business degree and wanted to go to law school, so I actually took the LSAT, took the GMAT, thought we would move here to do that, and just ended up, one thing after another, family life, and ultimately God had other plans. So we moved to the Near East Side, so around Little Flower. We live in Little Flower over a decade ago, and so I've got 4 kids of my own. I'm married for 21 years, have two foster sisters as well.
Okay.
And so all from the ages of 3 to 18 or 17 and a half. And so a lot of activity in our house, and I moved to Indianapolis 12 years ago to plant a church and just be a community developer and serve in the Near East Side. And that just compounded and grew, and ultimately in January transitioned from being that senior pastor to president, CEO of Elevate Indianapolis. Serves Arsenal Tech, high school students, and other IPS schools here in the Near East Side. So that's been kind of our journey that got us to this point.
Up to this point, yeah.
Well,
so give us an overview of Elevate Indianapolis. Take this in any direction you want to go. Obviously, this will become a conversation. We'll just pop in with our own questions. But give us what you're thinking about in terms of what Elevate does here in Indianapolis.
Yeah, so the kind of 1-minute snapshot of Elevate is ultimately we are a privately funded nonprofit that offers a state certified elective credit that teaches character and life skills. So right now our staff is at Arsenal Tech High School teaching students character and life skills during the day. So we have a team of teacher mentors. They teach during the day. So students are taking this as part of their regular class rotations. They may be algebra first period, Spanish second period, and Elevate third period. And then those same students, we mentor evenings, weekends, summer break, fall break, and we're available to them. So teach during the day, character life skills, live it out with them, mentoring the other times. And then our older students, we actually take them and we teach them how to teach the same thing they've learned to 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And so every single week, we actually take those older students, our elevator kids, we call them our leadership class, and they go in and they teach just down the street here at School 74, Spanish Immersion School, just right down the road from the studio here, and they teach. So if they learn about courage on a Tuesday, they teach it on a Thursday. Because obviously what we all know, and you guys know as doctors, is that you don't really know something until you teach it, right? Well, that's part of our model. It's called a pipeline, so we actually work with 4th through 12th graders, mentoring high school students. Our staff have caseloads, just like social workers do. They mentor them year-round. That's kind of the essentials, if you will, our distinctives of who we are. Tons of post-secondary prep, tons of adventure programming to help kind of drop the guard of students who can actually get behind their stories a little bit, walk with them. And that's a year-round, we say 24/7, 365 model, year-round teaching and mentoring with some of the most vulnerable students of our city. If you track the IBJ and all the reports done in the last year, all the zip codes the IBJ is chronicling, our students come from. And so we serve some of the most vulnerable and challenged students in the city through the IPS public schools.
Let's just, for our listeners' sake, what does IBJ stand for?
So Indianapolis Business Journal, it's the business journal focused on Indianapolis businesses, both large and small, civic interests. The last year have done a really incredible job, chronicling poverty in the city. What's the civic responsibility to that? Putting data and ROI, kind of backing to that. And they've done. Last Thursday, example came out. A piece came out that chronicled 47% of Marion County families are struggling, and they go through and unpack what struggling looks like. And the reality is, we serve the children of those families, and that's nearly half of our city. Now is in that place. We've had an incredible boom of economic growth the last decade here, but what's happened is a lot of folks still don't have a spot at the table, and our poor zip codes are still struggling. The ones that aren't, it's because they're being gentrified. And so you've got the dynamics at place, economic boom, but we serve the students who are still not experiencing the full benefit of that economic boom that maybe many of us have in our cities.
So let's pick up on just a couple of threads there that you've just pulled out of the fabric. One is gentrification. What does gentrification do to a neighborhood? But then take that and manifest it more in the lives of the individual students that you're working with. And by that I mean I'm interested to hear you talk about what the future holds. You know, we talk about an economic boom that hasn't reached these folks yet. What has to happen for this to take place? And is there any sense in which IBJ, Indianapolis Business Journal, can encourage economic growth even within these kinds of communities? I know that's a multifaceted question, and we're getting political even, so hang on, folks.
Well, I mean, I think, so we're talking about community development. So we're in the Near East Side, okay?
Yep.
So we can illustrate this really well, you know, here. You know, I would say, you know, what has been proven out in Indianapolis maybe 5-6 years ago is Indianapolis per capita had some of the highest home, you know, abandoned buildings rates in the country. So over 10,000 properties abandoned, homes and commercial buildings. And so, and the mayor put a plan in course to how do we deal with that. And 2,500 of those homes were torn down because they would be on salvage, and then the rest were this whole process. So the Near East Side here is a high per capita, that the highest. And if you go to Sherman and New York and Michigan area, that was one of the targeted areas. So 50% of the homes there were abandoned and vacant. And so developers come in and develop, turn these over. So I would say the positive of this is often that you're taking properties that have no value to the property, no value to the neighborhood, creating those to be livable assets to the community, right? So we've seen that here at the St. Clair Place. You know, just east of us is a lot of transformation, you know, has happened. And now you have businesses coming in. So just down the street here to the west of this Burger King is 2 brand new restaurants that would never have been here had the median income, you know, not raised of this Near East Side, right? So, there's assets to that. There's a strength to that.
Exactly.
Or they say the balcony of that. The basement of that, or weakness of that, is often what happens is when you don't have a development mindset of how do we lift up the folks that live within this community,
right?
You know, and serve them so they benefit from this.
Right.
We end up displacing them. And so what you end up doing is, you know, this has been going on for decades, but in this zip code here, in this neighborhood here, you end up displacing folks that new folks come in, see a benefit of a $250,000 house just, you know, right next door to us, right beside a $50,000 duplex, and now the taxes go up and they can't afford to live there, and they're not shopping at the, you know, the nice, you know, swanky restaurants. They're not, you know, they're not benefiting from those services directly anyway, and so you often have a lot of displacement. So IBJ yesterday came out with a report of the near West Side neighborhood called Stringtown. They say that's the start of what's happening there, is that it's a targeted neighborhood near West Side, and they can see a lot of the same, you know, on the very front end of that. So people are wrestling, how do we make sure that the folks that have been 30, 40-year residents there can stay residents there and not be displaced by middle and upper income folks moving in who are just looking for affordable places to live. So you've got the dynamics are very complicated.
It's very complicated. We talk about this, Dr. Cloud and I talk about the tension between the ideal and the real, and how we live literally with the tension of this, and how much can we abide when it comes to issues of justice. Though we don't want to get into all of that necessarily, but let's transition those thoughts about helping this next generation, mentoring this next generation. Let's include economics within that.
Sure.
So how does what you do at Elevate bear the mark of possibilities for the future, for the economic futures of these young people?
Well, for one, our graduation rate is 30% higher than your typical public school graduation rate. So students that are in our program graduate 95%, which is about 30% higher than their peers.
That's huge.
Graduation has a very clear ROI. So the cost of a high school dropout to society long term in social programming and incarceration, and go down the list of is about $2 million. So you're paying for that one way or the other. You know, you're going to pay for it in a new prison that's going in at Twin Air, a new jail system. You're going to pay for it in any number of subsidized programming. And so graduation rates are a measurable outcome. That's the negative illustration. The positive illustration of a graduate that turns into the future is they're a thriving asset contributor to our city. They bring great ideas. They bring diverse ideas because we're serving inner city public school kids, you know, right? And so they're a huge asset. And ultimately, we're a civic program. We're building better citizens, some of those marginalized citizens of our culture, which is an inner city child, right? Doesn't get more vulnerable than that. And so huge asset economically. When they graduate and have a plan for the future, and we follow IPS's mantra. I was at Rotary yesterday downtown, and Dr. Farabee there to present, reminded them their 3 E's: enroll, enlist, or employ. So for us, we take that as our mantra. We don't want to just run a good program as a nonprofit, which can very easily become common, like kind of, you do you, as the kids say, like you've got your program. But if our kids don't graduate with a plan to be enrolled, enlisted, or employed, that's not a win for us. It's because if they do, then they become an economic contributor. Then they become an economic benefactor. Pay goes up. Lawlessness goes down. They see the city with a different set of eyes, different set of ears. And so some of the things that, based on some of the different areas we were born into that are very normal, and maybe what family situation you were born into is not normal for them. They've never seen anything different. And so they just see with a different set of lenses. And
one of the things that stands out, and just for the sake of everybody listening to this and hearing this, ROI stands for return on investment. And this is a comment that Aaron just made about return on investment for the kind of programming Elevate Indianapolis does. But here's what so often business people forget, and that is that the ROI in your case is internal. You're developing the interiority of an individual, which is going to then change the external nature of their person. But that's something that's lost. Talk about how are you investing in businesses or leaders around Indianapolis to help them to understand the importance of developing the person from the inside out?
Wow. So I would say our ROI is internal and external. So we measure, one of the tools we use called the development asset profile. So 40 developmental assets, as a kind of universal standard of measuring. They say is that every human needs 40 assets to be able to thrive and contribute. And so we measure that every year with our kids. So we don't just say we teach courage. We measure how they've grown or how they've not grown, how we can do better. And so that's a measurable outcome. So we have 7 areas of a holistic child, so financial and social and emotional and physical and spiritual, because we want somebody to thrive. And in order to thrive, you've got to be growing in multiple areas of your life. And that's whoever you are, whatever situation you're born into. And so those are measurable gains that you can make, that we can see. And so I would say, for one, that's, we're about impact and results. And so that for us is we want everybody to see, now some of that is on, left side of the brain where it's more, social emotional learning pieces where your stuff you were talking about earlier, attachment, you're wrestling through, like, some of that's hard to measure, right? But you know it when you see it, right? Some of it is very clearly measurable, and that people see it by the data. And so we try to float on both sides pretty well.
So you're doing the mixed method of qualitative quantitative, huh?
We do.
Yeah.
We do. And business community and civic leaders see that, and they see we talk about assets, but we measure them. We talk about financial health, and we try to measure that as well. So what's that look like to take a student who's been with us for 3, 4, 5 years, and every year grow them to the point where by the time they graduate, it's not just good luck, but here are the tools you now have to be able to succeed in life, and that's a measurable tool. So all of that, I would say, is so from a business. If I'm an area business leader, and one of the things we hear constantly now, right, in our city is, are our folks prepared for the workforce? Do we have an informed, equipped workforce? Well, people love to hire our graduates because we can tell you here's what they were equipped with. And not only do they have a resume, because we help them develop a resume, but here are the assets that they have. So if they're not going off to college, enroll, and they're ready to be employed, here's what assets they have as an 18, 19-year-old to be employed by you. They've still got to, crawl before you walk and walk before you run, right? And that's all of us at any season. But people love our students, and so we're myth busters in that often we try to help people to get past the stereotypes and myths of what it means to employ an 18-year-old, public school grad of Arsenal Tech High School that, for no fault of our community, often have no idea what the life is like for the type of students that we serve. So how can we kind of get past those myths and see that they ask great questions, they're thirsty, they're hungry, they have dreams and visions of their own, and we're trying to help open doors so they can walk out their own dreams. And businesses are a huge asset to us, both financially as a partner, but then also as a long-term employment partner with us.
Well, one of the things, I've met Dr. Fairby, and he addressed by the Baptist Ministers Alliance once, and I heard him use the 3 E's. And I questioned with him then something I want to bring up with you today. One of my concerns at the time that he he said that was that I suggested he may have left off an E, and it was entrepreneurship. And so I'm wondering, does Elevate push or have any concepts in your approach to developing the economic understanding of some of these young people about the importance of entrepreneurship? And let me say this before you answer. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, he was called from Chicago to Memphis. In Chicago, he was doing what was called a Poor People's Campaign.
Sure.
One of the things he was trying to fight was that all of the black people, so many of the black people there, so many of the inner city blacks there were only employees, and there were very few businesses that were owned by African Americans. So I bring that in to bear with this, because a part of what's wrong within the IPS systems in several of these zip codes. I grew up in 46218. My church is in 46205. So I'm unfortunately kind of versed with some of what the plight has been over and I'm from Indianapolis. Is Elevate doing anything to cause them, yes, to be enrolled, yes, to be enlisted, yes, possibly to be employed, hopefully, but does it do anything to help them understand that ultimate success economically involves some ownership?
Yeah, great question. I would say, for one, we're an innovative approach to some age-old problems in the city. So I would say, one, they're experiencing innovation. So, right, to know what it looks like, you got to experience it a little bit. And so our kids get to be around, which they may not realize this is we're an urban youth nonprofit. There's 1,000 of those. But this is an innovative approach to going about executable, clear outcomes.
Do they have opportunities
so they get to experience that.
Work in mentoring with business owners, or maybe on your staff or something like that?
Well, one of the things, I mentioned this earlier, but our expertise isn't our model, although there's innovative there, there's distinctives there, right? Our expertise isn't in our content delivery. A lot of folks have been teaching vision and courage and respect, our attributes, right? You can go in once a year and teach the high school, teach courage for a day, give a pep talk. That's not new, by itself, et cetera. But what we do is build bridges to partnerships. And so this summer, for example, we had a SMART goal this summer for all of our programming. For 50% of our programming to be all in a partnership. And so taking our kids through purposeful design, Shepherd Community, CLD, serving at Ronald McDonald House, I can go on and on, not to mention college visits, post-secondary prep.
Right.
And so what we try to do is build bridges with them. We do what's called vision trips, where area businesses open their doors up. We bring pockets of students to come in and hear about it from the business owners, so hear about what this business does, how they function, and then for them to hear about who we are, what our students are. So vision it's a mutual vision. Often what happens is business folk in the area who have no exposure to inner city students, they get a new vision for what our kids are like, and students who have no access to the 23rd floor of a tower downtown now can see the whole city from a boardroom, and they got exposure. So vision is gained there.
Yeah, that's important.
And so that is a year-round activity for us. Year-round.
Right.
Year-round. Again, not because our model is to create entrepreneurs, but our model is to build bridges with folks that are doing it.
As a part of your approach. No, it's
so
you're doing it.
We want to be the
you
people that they trust.
CLD I know is doing it. My wife and
that's right.
My nephews are currently in CLD. So and I just think that's very important, and not just for black youth, but Latino youth, white youth, who because of the concrete jungles that they experience, often only see themselves getting out of that as finding a place. If they are concerned about education, it's coupled with just finding a place to be employed. And I tell our youth at our church all the time, I'm a business owner, and I talk to my 4 children as well about the importance of not just seeking to be an employee, but seeking to own and lead from the top.
Yeah, with urban students that have been, multi-generational poverty,
sure,
and they've lived in the most challenged zip codes, and so did their grandparents, grandparents, right? So that comes with, it takes some time to free open the mind.
Absolutely.
So for us, our job is exposure and year-round. So it's a slow drip. So not one thing we do may be transformative, but every year we have this constant repetition of slow drip. Again, all through mentoring. It's their mentoring. It's not the, look at our whiz bang model. It's not mentoring. Right. And they trust us and they listen to us, and then next month we do something else. If we do something else, so I think that creates long-term, adaptive leaders.
Absolutely.
That can break strongholds, that can wrestle through a different future.
The Bible says one planteth, another water, then God gives the increase. It's a process. That's right. Absolutely.
Got a couple pastors sitting to my left over here. I got to watch out now because the pulpits are coming out.
Everything he's saying is biblical.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And that's the reason why we have a focus on this show of bringing in Christians from around Indianapolis who are practicing Titus 3, 1, 8, and 14. Do good, do good, do good. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We're going to be taking a one-song break. When we come back, however, we're going to be continuing our interview with Aaron Story from Elevate Indianapolis, who is talking with us here today about mentoring urban youth in the core of the Indianapolis sector and how that then, of course, impacts and influences so many other arenas of life. Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We'll be right back. We are back. Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 10 until noon. We're right across the street from the Bonner Center, 2131 East 10th Street. Come by sometime and wave through our windows. I noticed, Aaron, that you were taking pictures through the plate glass this morning, so looking forward to checking those things out later on. We're here at Aaron's Story today talking about the importance of what he, as president and CEO of Elevate Indianapolis, is doing here at IPS, which is Indianapolis Public School System, and the importance of training children, mentoring children from the inside out, literally building them from the inside out. So, Aaron, as we come back into the second part of this interview this morning, what are some of the things that you would want to make sure that everybody hears? Maybe you want to talk about some of the stories of some of the young people that you've been engaged with, whatever. Help us to understand some of the things that stand out in your mind about Elevate.
I think mentoring, for one, as you all were talking about this earlier, I was taking notes and thinking, more on this. I mean, there's this phrase, Ubuntu, that we've heard and seen a lot. It's told me, I see you. I see you. And you think of the old, what's the old movie, White Men Can't Jump, where they're arguing and she says, you're listening, but you're not hearing me, right? And, well, I mean, mentoring is ultimately something that you're seen, right? And it's for who you are.
Yeah.
And wherever you're at, whatever season you're in, as chaotic or messy as it is. And so I think it's just an important part of mentoring is that somebody is walking with me and sees me for who I am. And that's a starting point, whether it's in the church, in the community, or in the schools. There's a lot of commonalities or a healthy mentoring, relationship, being available, being present, just kind of proximity, right? Which is sometimes that's caused and scheduled. Like we can schedule a time every week at 3 o'clock, and then sometimes that's just stuff happens. So last week, I was thinking about this. Earlier, I was meeting with one of my staff, and we had to cancel our meetings. He's walking up the stairs. He says, "Look, I just got a call from one of our students. They've got a crisis. They go to the hospital." I was like, "Well, that wasn't scheduled, but that relationship was so significant that student at 3:30 after the school day is over, calls, 'Can you take me to the hospital?' And that's what we do. So we cancel our staff meeting. Okay, go. That's the most important relationship. Those opportunities come up, right? And for us to engage and care for and mentor. And I think about when I think of the audience, what do we want to hear? I think a couple of things is for one, within a lot of our public schools, with a lot of IPS, we have a lot of students that want to be seen and heard, and want to be recognized and want to be valued. I mean, this is dignity work first. So we don't need saviors, we need servants. People that are willing to come in and just be a servant. Whatever your belief system is, right. Come in and be a servant. Right. And two, be open to myths being broken. We're we live in a very segregated city still, and it's not
really
segregation of old. Preaching here, but our zip codes define things.
Absolutely.
Our schools are very segregated, right. And so whatever you believe, it may or may not be the same as it was before. But the reality is, the outcomes are still such that you can be middle to upper income white person and not have any connection to communities of color. Mm-hmm. You can be a community of color, not have any connection to anybody of lighter hue, if you will. So in our public schools, this reality is, there's a lot of stereotypes that news perpetuates. So a couple weeks ago, there was a little fight on Tech's campus, and there was a handful of kids fighting, and it couldn't, it was 15 or so kids, couldn't be stopped. It was dealt with. So it gets called in. Well, guess what happens is, if we can't get news to show up often to do all sorts of positive stories, but we have every news station to show up when there's 20 officers on campus. And guess
first
what?
report I heard was there were 300 kids fighting.
There were 300 kids fighting, and that is not true.
Right.
That's not true.
Right. That's right.
We have people on campus that no, there was 15 or so kids.
Right.
Now there may be 200 kids filming. Because that's what kids do.
Yeah.
And you can pick any zip code and you fight. You're going to have kids out there filming
That's right.
to try to be the newest, world star hero. But I think just the reality is that those reinforce stereotypes of urban youth that cause all sorts of reconciliation issues we have in our culture, in the church, outside the church. And so come and show up on a campus. We do site visits. We walk folks around the campus. They see our classroom, they see the school, they talk about it, get to ask questions. But if you don't like it with us, do it with somebody else. Come and engage a culture of students that have as many dreams as your kids have. They have as much desire as your kids do. That maybe live an entirely different life as your family, your own children do, but have potential, have dreams, have talents, have fears, have strengths, but if we can never see them because we can't get past our stereotypes, we can't get to our barriers, we can't get past our segregated schools and neighborhoods, you can never see somebody. So we go back to, I need to be able to see them for who they are. And for me, this work came out of 8-9 years ago as a community developer, as a citizen in the East Side. Who is my neighbor conversation? Who is my neighbor? And half mile from my church was a campus of 2,000 students, the largest high school in the city, inside the Beltway, that lived an entirely different life than what my kids were living, than what our area here lives. And so that turned into, I need to learn about them. This is my neighbor. It's my literal, neighbor means literally near one. These are nearest to me, and so, how do you see them? Well, you've got to come into their world and their church. This is the incarnation, right? This is John 1. I dwelt among you. Right. The paraphrase of that is, I was in your neighborhood, right? Thank God Jesus didn't, literally thank God. Jesus wasn't this, you've got to come to us before you can dwell with us. No. I will dwell among your mess so I can invite you to come to me. My Father's house has many rooms for you, but you can't get to my Father's house without me. So we need to model this same incarnational relationship ministry. Let me just come and be with you. It's not flashy, it's not sexy, it's not quick. It is long-term relationship what it takes. And so I would say to our citizens, the city is, make the time and the space to prioritize this in some form or fashion. Everybody's calling isn't the same, everybody's place isn't the same, that we don't all need to do this, but have a space for this. Because I can guarantee you, whatever you put in, you think it'll be an asset, and you will receive way more out of this as myths and stereotypes are broken, and you realize you begin to see these kids are often as full of hope, full of potential, and need maybe an opportunity that maybe they just couldn't get otherwise. And so I think that's huge for everybody, whatever your background is.
One of the things that we do every single week here is promote the show ahead of time and as well after the time when we do the podcast. But when we promote the show, we always ask our guests to send us pictures. I have to tell you, Aaron, that you're one of the few people that has sent us pictures with other people in the pictures, which is really fascinating to me and wonderful, frankly. And I thought, this is really cool because Aaron's demonstrating that he's doing the proximity with thing, the neighbor thing that you're just talking about. So all of those pictures on social media, if you're listening to us, go check us out at either Dr. Clyde's page or mine at Facebook, Twitter, whatever. See these pictures for yourself. Aaron, tell us about some of the stories of these young people that are in these pictures, and maybe if they're not necessarily even in those particular pictures, but nonetheless, stories about individual students who you have helped in some way or another, some great lesson that was learned, or where they've gone on to and what they're doing today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, biblically we think of mentoring. Everybody says you got to have Paul and you got to have a Timothy. I think with this type of work, equity, reconciliation, education type of work, you benefit as much from the Timothy as you do your Paul. Like the reality is, I'm a different person than I was 10 years ago because of these students. And so sure, I think we help. We've opened some doors, but there's no doubt in my mind who's gained the most, from these students. And I know that's the thing to say, but it has been transformative. So some of these kids these are kids that, they're like my kids, and you get a chance to walk with and to hear their heart, hear their tears. And so the kind of work we do, we get to work with students in some of the greatest times of their life, and then backed up with some of the most difficult times of their life. And so, last year we had a dinner with some students that we took to celebrate some accomplishments they had, and take them to a great dinner in a nice area of town, and celebrating great, high moment, right? And then literally, as I'm taking a couple of kids home, take one of the students, home, literally there's police all through their block. And they say, like, oh, my neighbors are crazy, something's going on. And so we pull up, and the police were at their house, had arrested one of their family. So here, literally within 2 hours, we're at this highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And I'm there, in this moment of like, how do we love and care for and hug? And there's no answers to be had. There's no miracle to offer as much as I see you and I'm with you. And what does it look like to help make sure that your future is different than what you've experienced in some of the most challenged zip codes of our city, where the only time a lot of our students have encounters with police is when somebody is being arrested on their block. And that is the dynamic that a lot of our kids experience. So I think, those type of encounters have been transformative. Obviously, our goal is to help students graduate. For those that are meant to go to college, we've taken lots of college trips, all of Indiana colleges, both Elevate has, and then kind of my work prior to that. So the Taylors and Graces and Purdue's and IUPUI's and Ivy Tech's, Marion, we've got a new scholarship now to Marion, so we're going to offer this year Elevate students a couple of scholarships to Marion University, great college here in our own backyard. And so that's important for those that it's relevant to, for college-bound kids, and then for kids that aren't, how do we help them have a plan that can help them move ahead to the future as well? And so I get to hear updates and letters and pictures, and got a student at one of our kids we worked with for a couple of years at Ball State. He's on a football scholarship. So, now, I was a Notre Dame Irish fan my whole life. Now that's my second team. I'm a Cardinal now, I'm a chirp because of him. And I love that kid.
This weekend, huh?
And so I was, there's no doubt who I was cheering for. It's just that's a young man that's really important to me, important to a lot of us. And so we get to kind of journey with them. But just like parenting your own kids, right, doesn't stop when they graduate high school.
No.
Right? Mentoring doesn't, right? What a disappointment, to learn. But mentoring, some students closer than others, obviously, but this idea that we're available. And some kids, you go and, kids become adults, and you go in absences where you don't hear from them, and then all of a sudden you get an update, and you're just trusting that you've planted seeds that, can be nurtured, and maybe somebody else's time and tenure. But with students that we serve, most students, and Dr. Farabee shared this yesterday at Rotary, was most inner city students who graduate from IPS schools don't move outside of 15 miles of Indianapolis. And so statistical reality is we will have a lot of them will stay connected to. Hopefully, some of them, go off and get a great degree and then come back to want to serve their neighborhood, maybe as a business professional. But some of them, that's not the story. And so, we just serve the season that we're called to. We're foster parents. We're called for a certain season to serve them in a certain way, and the goal is reunification, so they would be back with their biological family if that works out. But we let go, and we're here for this season in life that you need us the most right now. Well, I think mentoring is often that way as well. We've had 20 years of great mentors. Some I haven't talked to for 20 years, but they were critical in that season. And I don't think that changes when you're serving inner city students either, as mentors.
You mentioned a moment ago Rotary, and this maybe ties back to something we talked about early on. How is the response at places like a Rotary to the kinds of things that are going on with Elevate? Do you have people come up to you and say, we need more of this? How can I help? Hey, I think the soft skills that are being developed here for students in the business world are huge. Talk to us about how are business leaders and community leaders responding to Elevate?
Very well. It's, obviously we're a 3-year-old entity here, so we're still a story that needs to be told, among the community. But so our board is full of incredible business leaders. So Tom Morales and Don Palmer and Steve, our board chair, these are longtime life-driven business leaders in our city that see this as such an asset that, when it was presented to Dr. Farabee, the thing he has said multiple times, at various events that we've done, is he wants to see this in all 4 of the IPS high schools with as many students as we can connect it to, because it has such clear civic, measurable gain that business leaders, see it. Mayor Joe's been at a number of events that we've done as well, because again, they see this as an asset. While we're a new emerging nonprofit, the idea of how can we put this in front of as many business civic leaders, because it has such, clear value of soft skills that often, aren't being taught, in various settings, and that's whatever zip code you live in. I meet people in Warren, I meet people in Carmel, I meet people in Ben Davis just yesterday, and it's well, what would it like for you to have this over here? Because we can see this as a value. So it's not that, but our focus is IPS. Our focus is the most vulnerable kids in our city, and a lot of them end up in IPS, and so that's where we want to be. So yes, it's a great response, business community. Obviously, we're looking to build partnerships that turn into, connecting our students with those businesses and connecting that financial support. So we be a sustainable, long-term relationship with an organization. It takes critical partnerships with foundations and businesses to be able to do that.
What do you see as the future for Elevate? You mentioned that this is 3 years old. If you have a crystal ball, or if you could create the image that you see in the crystal ball, what does that look like down the road for you in terms of personnel, in terms of work, in terms of its magnification outside of IPS, whatever?
I mean, I think, a 30,000-foot view, ultimately we're not a school program. We're serving neighborhoods in our city. I mean, we see this as developing leaders in the most vulnerable neighborhoods in our entire city. So what I see down the road is in Indianapolis, the zip codes that are being reported for often negative are now full of people that have hope, and measurable hope at that. Students see themselves as civic leaders in their community, not just I can't wait till I can get out of here, as much as I'm going to be part of the change that's going to transform this neighborhood, so we don't have to rely on gentrification to change neighborhoods. So people within, we can lift up. This is your city, your neighborhood, your zip code. How can you help that? So I think 30,000-foot view is that. I mean, in 20 years, what a beautiful story it would be that we'd help mobilize 1,000 leaders. That maybe some are teachers, some are doctors, some are business owners, some are carpenters that live in the neighborhoods that we've been able to serve through the schools as a pipeline. Practically for us, that's drilling down deeper at Tech. Tech is the largest IPS high school. It's over 2,600 students right now, on the campus. We're growing like we've never grown before. We want to keep growing at Tech. Our next division will be on the west side, so if we'd be able to be at Washington High School next, that would be a vision for us. And kind of the goal would be every couple of years launch, then at Addix, and then maybe after that Shortridge. A lot of that's resource and partner driven, but we're great at Tech. Incredible principal this year, Mr. Franklin. He'd be a great guest if you have the time to get away during the day. But great leader of the school with a great team around him, and so we want to grow with that team and that school, and then look to the future. Hopefully in the near west side next, but that's kind of what we're aiming at. It's what our board's discussing actively. What we're talking about with partners. How do we scale this? Again, measurable results. We do things very calculated, and so we want to be able to go deep and wide. But we serve students hundreds of hours a year with the same students, and we're always going to maintain that as in our growth. We want to make sure we can always kind of penetrate, go to walk with students in that way.
The impressive nature of this endeavor that you have at Elevate certainly must take into account these leaders in schools. You just mentioned one at Tech. Tell us about the importance of leadership at the local IPS school level and the importance of what that means for connecting with you, but beyond that, how important that is that young people at these schools see strong leaders as principals and administration.
Well, I mean, leaders set culture, right? Leaders emphasize values. Leaders can help change culture, I mean, not by themselves in a vacuum, but as part of a team. And so the importance of leadership, and in the case of IPS, they really go towards empowering their school principals and assistant vice principals, and so they have a lot of local autonomy and authority to execute based on the students that they're serving. And so that person or that team is really critical to set the culture of what the school is going to be like. And so last Friday, for example, sat through a presentation with other community partners that were there. And here, he's setting a goal for an over 90% graduation rate, over a 95% attendance rate. Well, I love that because I appreciate it says our kids are capable of more. Let's quit setting a low bar and saying a little better than that's good enough, but let's push them to a much higher bar than I've seen anybody else set. So I appreciate that, knowing that our kids are capable of more. They do deserve the best. They do deserve better resources. I mean, it was last week I heard that Shortridge couldn't have their homecoming game because it was rained out. It's the only football game in the city that was rained out because the field's not adequate enough. We have set such a low bar for often the poorest citizens of our city, the most vulnerable kids in our city, that we say, well, that's okay. They don't really need any better. But in the townships and suburbs, that would never fly. So we want to set a higher bar, and the local leader, the principal, the administration team, they set that culture in place. So maybe the school doesn't hit a 95% graduation rate this year, but maybe they hit 85%, and that'd be 10% better than last year, or maybe more than that even. But what a dream would that be, that we have somebody that says, I see more in you, I see you, and I see a lot of potential. Not I see you and I don't know. The leaders go a long way of setting culture that rallies community partners and sets community partners. And a principal can't cause an outcome like this. It takes a team, it takes a city, it takes a village. Right? And so businesses are critical to that. Nonprofits are critical to that, but a principal opens the door for that, and I think we've got a wide open door with Principal Franklin at Tech right now to execute that vision.
You said leaders set culture. That's huge. And of course, what's the famous line? Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So you can have the best strategies around, but if you don't grow a culture that changes from the inside out, that's not going to fly. We just have a couple minutes left here, Aaron. Thanks ever so much for being here and spending so much time with us. If there was anything that you wanted to leave our listeners with, 3 points in a poem or whatever you want to do here in the last couple of minutes, what would you want to leave with people?
Well, I think for Elevate Indy, you can go to our website, elevateindy.org, hear about what we do, watch videos of some of our past students. We do site visits all the time. We love to host people. I mean, that's one of the best parts of my job, hosting folks that have never been on Tech's campus, never met a Tech student. We do those formally and informally. We'd love to build those bridges we just tell our story endlessly and kind of trust the results with where it goes. Ultimately, like I said, we want to partner with folks to create outcomes for students that often when people meet for the first time, these types of students, I often hear stories of just minds are blown. They can't believe there's so much potential in these kids that maybe impressions have been built through other ways that we can help remove those barriers. So just open door to discussions and see where it goes, and would love to continue to talk with your audience that
way.
Way.
Yeah.
So
anybody listening here today through the podcast later on, watching us on live YouTube or Facebook, whatever, Aaron is here to not only serve these students but serve you, to help you serve them. I think that's an important concept, of course, for all of us. Dr. Clyde Posley, always a pleasure to be with you, brother.
Pleasure's mine, my friend.
Always glad to have you.
Yesterday.
Yeah, fantastic interaction with Aaron. Aaron, one more time, thanks ever so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Harold H.B. Bell is going to take us away here with some cool jazz music as we transition. 10-Point Coalition, you'll be hearing some more from them at Radio Next in the next hour. Next week, Tina Cosby is coming in, and she's one of the story journalists here in Indianapolis. She's going to be with us. Can't wait to interview her and the new endeavors that she's engaging with here in the city of Indianapolis. You've been listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 10 until noon. Looking forward to next week, and until that time, we'll see you then.